Okay, so let's dive into this whole drone thing.
All right.
It seems like every time I turn around, there's another story about some unidentified drone buzzing
Yeah.
around.
Sure.
We've got a stack of articles here. And honestly, some of this stuff is pretty wild.
Yeah, it's concerning.
So are we just dealing with a bunch of, you know,
Yeah.
overzealous hobbyists, or is there something more?
I think it's a great question to ask.
Yeah.
I think, one of the things that we should start with is that, these incidents are happening everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just in your backyard. We're
Right.
seeing reports near airports, military bases, even critical infrastructure.
Right.
That's not just a casual weekend flight, right?
No.
So that's one of the things.
Yeah, it's not just the locations, it's the behavior.
Right.
Like that wave of sightings back in 2019 in the Midwest.
Yeah.
Huge drone formations flying in perfect sync for hours at a time.
Hours.
If that doesn't send chills down your spine,
Yeah.
I don't know what will.
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie, except it's happening right now.
Right.
And, this isn't just about spooky lights in the sky. We're talking about some very real potential threats.
Okay, so let's get into that.
Okay.
What kind of dangers are we actually talking about?
Sure.
Give me the worst case scenario.
Well, imagine a drone colliding with a passenger plane
Oh, yeah.
during takeoff.
Mm.
We already saw this happen in the UK back in 2017.
Oh, well.
A drone actually hit a jet
Oh,
and damaged the wing.
wow.
Luckily, there were no serious injuries, but
Right.
it highlights the very real risk to commercial aviation.
Oh, for sure.
And think about the potential chaos if a drone sighting shuts down an airport,
Yeah.
delays diversions, economic impacts.
Yeah.
It's a ripple effect.
That's scary stuff. And what about, the whole spy movie scenario?
Yeah.
Drones equipped with cameras, snooping around military bases, stealing secrets, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a legitimate concern. Drones are relatively small, easy to deploy, and potentially difficult to detect.
Right.
That makes them a valuable tool for espionage.
Yeah.
Whether it's a rival nation spying on our military,
Right.
a company engaging in corporate espionage, or even a criminal organization gathering information.
Yeah.
And this is only going to get more sophisticated as drone technology advances.
So we've got potential threats to aviation national security.
Right.
What else?
Well, there's also the potential for drones to be used for malicious purposes.
Right.
Imagine a drone carrying a harmful payload, explosives, chemical agents,
Right.
you name it.
Yeah.
Or a swarm of drones disrupting critical infrastructure like power grids.
Yeah.
It's not something to be taken lightly.
Right.
And let's not forget about the implications for our everyday lives.
Mhm.
Drones equipped with cameras could easily be used for unauthorized surveillance,
Yeah. Right.
eroding our privacy in ways we haven't even begun to consider.
So it's not just about hypothetical threats, but about how these drones could change the very fabric of our lives.
Yeah.
And the really unsettling part is we don't even know who's behind them, do we?
It's a puzzle with a lot of missing pieces.
Yeah.
But these articles we have lay out some intriguing possibilities.
Okay.
Let's dive into those, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay. So first up, could this be the work of government agencies?
Right.
Are we talking about secret surveillance programs, maybe even the FBI or Homeland Security?
It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
We know government agencies use drones for various purposes.
Right.
And it wouldn't be surprising if some of those operations extend into domestic airspace.
Right.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
The FBI has investigated some of these incidents, but they're not confirming any government involvement.
Oh,
So
interesting.
it's still very much a black box.
So cloak and dagger stuff as usual.
Right.
But even if it's not a deliberate government operation, couldn't some of these drones be accidentally straying from military testing grounds?
That's another possibility.
Yeah.
The military is heavily invested in drone development and testing,
Mm-hmm.
and it's conceivable that some of those drones could end up in areas they shouldn't be.
Right.
Of course, that raises the question of oversight and accountability.
Yeah.
How can we prevent these kinds of accidental intrusions?
Right, exactly. Okay, so we've got the government angle,
Mm-hmm.
but what about the private sector?
Okay.
Could we be looking at companies like Amazon or Google testing out new drone delivery systems?
Sure.
Or even engaging in a bit of corporate espionage?
Well, the commercial drone industry has exploded in recent years.
Right.
Companies like Amazon, Google, and UPS are all betting big on drone delivery.
Yeah.
It's not hard to imagine that some of these companies might be testing their tech in ways that could explain these sightings.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about smaller bidders, too.
Yeah.
Drones are being used for everything from agriculture to real estate to security.
Yeah.
And it's easy to see how those operations could lead to accidental or intentional airspace violations.
Makes sense. So we've got government agencies, private companies,
Right.
but now we're getting into the really shady territory.
Yeah.
What about criminal or malicious groups?
Okay.
Could these drones be used for smuggling, spying, or even planning attacks?
That's a very real concern.
Yeah.
Drones have already been used for smuggling drugs across borders.
Oh.
And their low cost and ease of use make them an attractive tool for criminal activity.
Yeah?
And the fact that extremist groups have expressed interest in using drones for their own purposes
Yeah.
is particularly alarming.
Okay, so that's a whole new level of scary.
Right.
But it doesn't stop there, does it?
Nope.
We have to consider the geopolitical angle, too.
Mm-hmm.
Could these drones be the eyes and ears of rival nations?
Sure.
Spying on U.S. military operations or testing our defenses?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Countries like China and Russia are heavily invested in drone technology. And it wouldn't be surprising if they were using drones to gather intelligence or probe our vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
There have even been reports of foreign drones spotted near U.S. military bases,
Wow.
though those cases are usually shrouded in secrecy.
So we've got a whole lineup of suspects here.
We do.
From the mundane to the downright terrifying.
Yes.
Like a real-life episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Right.
But with potentially huge consequences for our safety and security.
And that's the thing that makes this issue so challenging.
Right.
We're dealing with a technology that's rapidly evolving,
Right.
and the traditional ways of monitoring and regulating airspace are struggling to keep up.
So what's being done about it?
Well,
Are there any efforts to crack down on these unidentified drones
there are.
and figure out who's behind them?
It's a complex and evolving landscape.
Okay.
The good news is that there have been some key legislative developments.
Okay.
The FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018
Okay.
was a big step forward, aiming to improve drone safety and security.
Okay, remind me, what exactly did that act do?
Well, a key part of it was the introduction of remote identification for drones.
Okay.
It's like a digital license plate
Oh, okay.
that would allow authorities to track drones and identify their operators.
Right.
It's still in the early stages of implementation,
Yeah,
but it's a major step towards greater transparency and accountability.
that makes sense. But technology aside, who's actually in charge of dealing with these drones when they're spotted?
Right.
Is it the FAA, the FBI, local police?
Yeah.
It seems like a bit of a jurisdictional mess.
It is a bit of a patchwork, honestly.
Yeah.
At the federal level, you've got the FAA,
Okay.
the DHS, and the DoD all working together
Okay.
to develop counter-drone strategies.
That's the team effort then.
It has to be.
Right.
The threat from drones is so multifaceted
Right.
that it requires a coordinated response.
Right.
The FAA is focused on airspace safety,
Uh-huh.
the DHS on security threats, and the DoD on protecting military assets.
Yeah.
They all have a role to play.
Okay. I'm starting to get the picture.
Okay.
But what about at the local level?
Yeah.
What happens when someone calls 911
Right.
because they see a suspicious drone hovering over their neighborhood?
Well, that's where things get tricky.
Yeah.
It really varies depending on the resources and training of
Yeah.
the individual police department.
Sure.
Some have invested in counter-drone technology, like radar systems or jamming devices.
Right.
But many are still playing catch-up.
Yeah.
It's a real challenge for local law enforcement to keep pace with this rapidly evolving technology.
So we've got federal agencies, state and local law enforcement, all trying to figure out how to deal with these unidentified drones.
Yeah.
It sounds like a bit of a Wild West out there.
That's a pretty accurate assessment.
Yeah.
And it highlights the need for more clarity, coordination, and resources
Right.
if we're going to get a handle on this problem. It's not just about reacting to individual incidents,
Uh-huh.
but about developing a comprehensive strategy
Yeah.
for managing the risks posed by drones, both known and unknown.
And that's a perfect segue to what I wanted to ask next.
Yeah.
We've talked about all these potential threats, but why should the average person care about this?
Yeah,
Is this just government paranoia?
that's a good question.
Or is there something more to it?
It's definitely more than just paranoia.
Okay.
Unidentified drones represent a convergence of several important trends.
Okay.
The rapid development of technology, the changing landscape of security threats,
Right.
and the evolving relationship between personal freedom and government oversight.
So it's not just about drones themselves, but about the bigger picture of how technology is changing our world and forcing us to rethink our assumptions about privacy security,
Right.
and who controls the skies above us.
Exactly. And the choices we make today about how we regulate and manage this technology
Will have far-reaching consequences for years to come.
Wow. That's a lot to take in. But before we wrap up this part of the deep dive, I want to shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about the counter-drone technology that's being developed.
Okay.
What are some of the ways authorities are trying to combat these unidentified drones?
Well, there's a whole spectrum of approaches being explored,
Okay.
from low-tech solutions to some pretty high-tech stuff.
Okay.
On the simpler end,
Uh-huh.
you've got things like nets and snares
Okay.
that can be used to physically capture drones.
So it's like catching butterflies, but with a lot more at stake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you've got electronic jamming devices
Uh,
that can disrupt a drone's communication signals,
okay.
effectively cutting off its connection to the operator
Right.
and forcing it to land.
That sounds pretty effective. But are there any downsides?
Well, jamming signals can interfere with other electronic devices in the area,
Right.
so it has to be used very carefully.
So not something you'd want to deploy in a crowded city center.
Right, and then you have some more advanced technologies like directed energy weapons.
Okay.
These use high-powered lasers or microwaves
Wow.
to disable or even destroy drones.
Lasers. So we're actually using laser beams to take down drones?
It does sound like science fiction.
What's wild?
But these are real systems being
Right.
developed and tested by the military and other agencies.
Okay.
They offer a more precise and targeted way to deal with drones that pose a serious threat.
But I imagine those come with their own set of ethical and legal considerations,
Sure.
especially if they're being used in civilian airspace.
Absolutely.
Right.
The use of any counter-drone technology has to be carefully weighed against the potential risks to public safety and privacy.
Yeah.
And then there's the development of specialized drone interceptors.
Okay.
Essentially drones designed to hunt down and capture other drones.
It's like a dogfight in the sky, but with robots?
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
These interceptors can be equipped with nets, tethers, or even small projectiles
Wow.
to disable or capture rogue drones.
It's incredible how fast this technology is evolving.
Yeah.
It seems like every time we come up with a new way to counter these drones, they come up with something new to stay one step ahead.
That's the nature of this challenge.
Yeah.
It's a constant game of cat and mouse between
Yes.
those who want to use drones for harmful purposes
Right.
and those who are trying to defend against them.
Well, this is definitely fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
And a little bit scary,
It is a little bit scary.
but I can't wait to hear more about the solutions that are being developed and implemented.
That's a great topic for part 2.
Yeah.
I'm excited to talk about it.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, so it really is a fascinating and concerning topic.
Yeah.
But it's not all doom and gloom.
Right.
There have been some really interesting developments in how authorities are trying to get a handle on the situation.
Okay.
And some of the solutions are pretty ingenious.
Okay, you've got my attention. Let's talk solutions.
Oh.
Because honestly, all this talk about potential threats and mysterious operators is making me a bit nervous.
Understandable.
What are we actually doing to make our skies safer?
Well, as we touched on earlier, the FAA has been busy.
Right.
They're not just trying to figure out who's flying these drones,
Uh-huh.
but also working to integrate drones safely into our airspace.
Mm-hmm.
Think of it as trying to create a system
Okay.
where drones and traditional aircraft can coexist peacefully.
So are we talking about dedicated drone highways in the sky or something like that?
Not quite highways,
Okay.
but the concept is similar.
Okay.
The FAA is looking at creating specific corridors or zones
Okay.
where drones can operate safely and efficiently.
Uh-huh.
Perhaps even with dedicated air traffic control for drones.
Oh, wow.
This could help reduce the risk of collisions with planes
Right.
and make it easier to monitor drone activity.
That makes sense. Keep the drones in their designated lanes, so to speak. But what about those drones that are intentionally breaking the rules?
Yeah,
Flying into restricted airspace or up to no good?
right.
What's being done to stop those?
That's where the counter-drone technology comes in.
Okay.
And some of the stuff they're developing is straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Hit me with the futuristic tech. What are we talking about here?
Well, we talked about jamming earlier,
Right.
which disrupts communication signals.
Uh-huh.
But there are also high-powered lasers that can literally zap a drone out of the sky.
Whoa.
Think of it like a very precise,
Okay.
very powerful laser pointer,
Yeah.
except it can disable a drone's electronics or even cause it to combust.
Wow, that's intense.
Yeah.
But wouldn't that be dangerous in a populated area?
Yeah.
I mean, shooting lasers out of the sky sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It's definitely not a solution to be used lightly.
Right.
These laser systems are being developed primarily for military applications
Okay.
or for use in highly controlled environments. But it's an example of how seriously agencies are taking the threat of rogue drones.
Okay, lasers for extreme cases.
Right.
But what about something a little less explosive? Are there any solutions that are more, well, subtle?
There are some surprisingly clever approaches out there.
Okay.
For instance, some companies are developing systems that use nets to capture drones.
Really?
Imagine a giant net
Okay.
launched from the ground or even from another drone
Oh.
that ensnares the target drone mid-flight.
So it's like a high-tech butterfly net for drones.
Right. And then there are systems that use radio waves
Okay.
to disrupt the drone's control signals,
Uh-huh.
forcing it to land safely.
So they lose control.
They lose control.
Okay.
It's like a remote control kill switch, but for drones.
It's fascinating to me that for all this advanced tech, sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it highlights the ingenuity that's going into tackling this complex problem.
Okay, so we've got lasers nets, signal jammers. It sounds like we're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at this problem.
Right.
What about the government response we discussed earlier?
Okay.
We talked about the FAA working on remote ID for drones.
Yeah,
Is that actually happening?
it is.
Oh.
That was a key provision of the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act.
Oh, right.
You see, FAA reauthorization happens periodically,
Okay.
and it's basically Congress's way of updating aviation laws and funding the FAA.
Right.
That particular act was huge for drone regulation
Yeah.
because it mandated remote ID.
Right.
The idea is that eventually all drones will be required to broadcast their location,
Okay.
altitude, and identification information.
So no more anonymous drones lurking in the sky. I like it.
Right.
But how do you even enforce something like that, especially with so many different types of drones out there?
It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
And the technology is still evolving.
Right.
There are a lot of logistical and technical challenges to work through. For example, the system needs to be secure and reliable.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
You don't want hackers spoofing drone IDs.
Right.
Or the system crashing during a critical operation.
That makes sense. It seems like there's a lot of pressure on the FAA to get this right.
There is.
Yeah.
They're working with industry partners to develop standards and testing protocols.
Good.
But it's not just about the tech itself.
Right.
It's about getting buy-in from drone manufacturers and operators.
Right.
Everyone needs to be on the same page for this to work.
Speaking of working together, earlier we talked about the different government agencies involved in the drone issue.
Yes.
We know the FAA, DHS, and DoD all have roles to play.
Uh-huh.
But are they actually coordinating effectively?
It's a work in progress.
Okay.
There have been some positive developments
Ah.
in terms of interagency communication and collaboration.
Right.
But there's always room for improvement.
Yeah.
A key challenge is that each agency has its own priorities and perspectives.
Right.
The FAA is focused on safety, the DHS on security,
Right.
and the DoD on military readiness.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to align those different goals.
So it's like trying to herd cats, but with government agencies.
That's a pretty accurate analogy.
Yeah.
But there have been some promising signs.
Okay, good.
For example, there's been increased information sharing between agencies,
Right?
which is crucial for identifying and responding to potential threats.
Yeah.
They're also conducting joint training exercises
Good stuff.
to improve coordination and response capabilities.
So baby steps, but in the right direction?
I'd say so.
Okay.
There's still a long way to go,
Right.
but it's encouraging to see that agencies are recognizing the need for a more unified approach.
It seems like we're focusing a lot on the reactive side of things.
Yeah,
Catching bad guys, stopping threats.
right.
But what about being proactive?
Okay.
What about using drone technology for good?
Yeah,
We touched on this earlier,
right.
but I'd love to dive a bit deeper.
That's a great point. It's easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom.
Right.
But drones have incredible potential to benefit society.
Yeah.
We already see them being used for things like search and rescue,
Right.
package delivery,
Uh-huh.
infrastructure inspection, and even aerial photography and filmmaking.
I've even seen farmers using drones to monitor crops and spray pesticides with incredible precision.
Exactly.
It's pretty amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
There are so many potential applications for drone technology that we haven't even thought of yet.
Like the early days of the internet. We
Right.
had no idea the ways it would transform our lives.
Exactly.
Right.
The potential is truly enormous.
Yeah.
But to fully realize that potential, we need to balance innovation with responsibility.
Right.
That means having clear regulations, ethical guidelines, and a strong focus on safety and security.
So it's about ensuring that drone technology is used for good, not just for nefarious purposes.
Precisely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations,
Yeah.
to raise awareness and to engage the public in this discussion.
Right.
The future of drone technology is not predetermined. It's something we're actively shaping through our choices and actions.
Well, I think you've given our listeners a lot to think about.
Yeah.
We've covered everything from laser beams to butterfly nets, from government conspiracies to the potential for drones to solve world hunger.
Exactly.
It's been quite a ride.
It has.
Yeah. But before we wrap up this part of the deep dive,
Okay.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier.
Sure.
The mystery of who's behind these unidentified drones.
Right.
We've explored various possibilities.
Yeah.
But do you have any personal theories?
I have to admit, it's really tough to say.
Okay.
There's just not enough information to make a definitive judgment.
Right.
But I think it's likely a mix of things.
Okay.
Maybe some hobbyists, maybe some commercial operators. But there's always that possibility of something more nefarious going on.
Right. So you're not ruling out the possibility of, government agencies or
No, I'm not.
on actors or anything like that.
I'm not ruling anything out at this point.
It's like a real life X-Files episode.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
But let's stick to the facts for now.
Okay.
What do you think is the most likely explanation
Yeah.
for the majority of these unidentified drone sightings?
Well, I think it's probably a combination of factors.
Okay.
Some cases might be explained by accidental airspace intrusions,
Okay.
either from hobbyists or commercial operators.
Right.
Others might involve deliberate,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily malicious activities,
Right.
like companies testing their technology
Mhm.
or individuals pushing the boundaries of what's allowed.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's always the possibility of more nefarious actors,
Right.
whether it's criminal organizations, extremist groups, or even foreign governments.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer.
Right. Each case needs to be investigated on its own merits.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think it's important to keep an open mind
Yeah.
and avoid jumping to conclusions.
Right.
We need to let the investigations play out and follow the evidence where it leads.
That's the voice of reason speaking. But
Yeah.
I have to admit, the mystery is part of what makes this whole topic so fascinating.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that we're living in a world where the lines between the known and the unknown are becoming increasingly blurred.
So it's a bit of a thrill ride, but with some real-world consequences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a thrill ride that's just getting started.
Well, on that note, I think it's time to move on to the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors.
It's fascinating how this whole drone thing has captured the public imagination.
It really has.
It's changed the way I look at the sky, that's for sure.
I know what you mean.
I mean,
It makes you think twice
yeah, exactly.
about what's going on up there.
I used to just see planes and birds,
Right.
maybe the occasional helicopter.
Yeah.
But now I find myself looking for anything
Yeah.
out of the ordinary.
Right.
Anything that moves a little too smoothly,
Right.
too quickly.
It's like we're all a little more aware now.
It's like our awareness of the airspace has shifted.
And I think that shift in awareness
Yeah.
is a key part of why this issue is so significant.
Okay.
It's not just about the technology,
Right.
but about how it changes our perception
Right.
of the world around us.
Yeah.
Drones are forcing us to reconsider what we thought we knew
Yeah.
about privacy, security,
Right.
even the nature of sovereignty.
It's like a wake-up call in a way.
It is.
We're being reminded that the rules of the game are changing.
Right.
And we need to adapt our thinking to keep up.
Absolutely. And it's not just about adapting to the technology. It's
Yeah.
about thinking critically about its implications.
Okay, so what kind of implications are we talking about?
Well, for one,
Yeah.
what kind of society do we want to create
Right.
in a world where drones are commonplace?
Yeah.
What are the limits of surveillance and data collection?
Those are big questions.
They are.
Yeah.
These are questions we need to be grappling with now
Right.
before the technology outpaces our ability to control it.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the potential downsides,
Right.
the threats, the unknowns.
Yeah.
But let's flip the script for a moment.
Okay.
Drones can be used for good, too, right?
Absolutely. And that's something that often gets lost in the conversation.
Yeah, I agree.
Drones have the potential to revolutionize industries, improve our lives, and even help us solve some of the world's most pressing problems.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, think about agriculture.
Okay.
Farmers are already using drones to monitor crops,
Right.
identify areas that need attention, and apply pesticides with incredible precision.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how they can just,
It's remarkable.
pinpoint exactly where they need to spray.
Yeah,
Exactly.
incredible.
This not only improves efficiency, but also reduces the environmental impact of farming.
That's pretty amazing. And I've heard about drones being used in search and rescue operations too, right?
Exactly.
Like finding lost hikers and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Drones equipped with thermal cameras
Right.
can be incredibly effective at locating missing persons,
Yeah.
especially in challenging terrain.
Makes sense.
They can also be used to deliver supplies to disaster areas,
Right.
reaching places that might be inaccessible by other means.
So it's like having a bird's eye view,
Right.
but with the ability to act quickly and precisely.
Exactly. And then there are applications like infrastructure inspection.
Here.
Instead of sending workers to climb bridges or power lines,
Yeah.
we can use drones to conduct inspections safely and efficiently,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
identifying potential problems
Right.
before they become major disasters.
It's incredible to think about all the ways drones are being used to make our lives better.
It is.
And it makes you wonder what the future holds, doesn't it?
It really does.
What will we be using drones for in 5, 10, 20 years?
It's hard to even imagine. The
Yeah.
potential is truly limitless.
Yeah.
But here's the key.
Okay.
To realize that potential, we need to be proactive.
Okay.
We need to be thinking about the ethical implications of this technology, developing responsible regulations,
Right.
and fostering a culture of safety and accountability.
So it's not just about reacting to problems as they arise,
No.
but about shaping the future of drone technology
Exactly.
in a way that benefits society as a whole.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. We started this duck dive with a sense of mystery,
Yeah.
even a bit of fear.
I understand that.
But I'm walking away from it with a sense of hope, even excitement
Yeah.
about the possibilities that drones hold for the future.
I feel the same way.
It's a powerful technology,
It is.
and it's up to us to use it wisely.
Well said.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of unidentified drones.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a fascinating journey full of twists and turns,
It has.
but ultimately a reminder that the future is what we make it.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
And until next time, keep looking up and keep asking questions.